So to begin our presentation, of course we have to tell you about the article, because that was the requirement where we needed to send our article to our course coordinator. We searched and Ranesh found this particular article. It's about the Cook Island students' attitudes towards physical education. It was a survey that was done back in 2016 by two authors, Awe Te'awa and Ruby Davis.
So for every research, it begins knowing the aim and objectives. Thus far, for our article, our chosen article, the aim of the study was to examine student awareness of teaching that included cultural activities with an emphasis of Cook Island traditional cultural values. From that, we found the main objectives of the article were to focus on students' attitudes, specifically in physical education classes, to several students and teachers in year 9 and 10 from 3 different schools, and lastly to transform data collected into meaningful information pertaining to how students and teachers connect their traditional values to physical education.
In any research, there is always a reason behind it. Now, this slide discusses on what is being studied and why. The study considered how physical education teachers use a culturally responsive pedagogy in teaching to influence student participation and enjoyment in physical education. Right? This also encouraged physical education teachers to become more confident as change agents in teaching culturally responsive pedagogy. Researchers including Thompson 1994, Billing 1995 and Thelman 2003 have previously examined the notion of employing cultural responsive pedagogy in teaching in order to enhance student learning and classroom participation. Right? The researchers of this article got inspired from the literatures written by these fellow authors and decided to build on their findings, right, into their own research. And that is how they came up with 2 research questions, which will be discussed in the next slide.
As Ranesh has discussed in the previous slide, these are the 2 research questions from this article by Te'awa and Ruby Davis. The first research question is, what are students' perceptions of teaching, which includes cultural activities and has emphasis on Cook Island traditional values? And the second research question for this article was, could the inclusion of cultural activities influence student learning, participation, and enjoyment in physical education?
Ranesh had covered the statement of the problem, and then Darshika covered the research questions. So they took this and then they presented this article. So I'm going to summarize some main points that we found from the article. Now the article covered 101 students and 3 teachers from 3 distinct schools. We are assuming that NC, TC, and PC represent Terera College, Nukutera College, and Papa'aro, but that's just us assuming. They also did 5% of the 101 students were from non-Cook Island backgrounds, like the 3 of us. They asked 20 questions, open-ended, and some closed as well, just asking for students' perceptions of the questions. So what did we find? From the article, they say that girls seem to like the cultural aspects to be included in physical education, specifically because there was dancing and drumming included. On the flip side, the boys just wanted to play, which is somewhat true. They found that the girls were more proactive in the cultural side of things. That's not to say that the boys didn't, but the boys just thought of PE classes like us, traditionally, we think that PE means play. We also found that there were differences between the students' perceptions of what PE is versus the teachers. A lot of the teachers that teach physical education ended up being from overseas, predominantly from New Zealand. The curriculum that is taught in year 9 and 10 is the Cook Island curriculum, but because we have teachers from New Zealand, they bring in their NCEA. That's all reflected in this article. The other thing that we also found was, as much as the Cook Island curriculum was trying to include the aspects of respect, right, like akana tete, discipline, akatano, right? So these words they were trying to get the teachers and the students to understand the meaning of through physical education activities. So what they found was that the girls, like we say, lean towards that, whereas the boys not so much. The first thing that we looked at, so the three of us, was that when we went to the bibliography, you could see that 80% are Western authors that they have reflected on. Now what does that tell you? That this basically is a Western perspective of physical education and culture. Now when they found the foundings, like I mentioned in the previous slide, is that girls prefer to have culture included in PE as compared to the boys. But this came out from the quantitative data. On the flip side, when the qualitative questions were asked, which is probably on the one-on-one, then students did say that they wanted to learn about their culture. I mean, who doesn't want to learn about their culture? We all feel that culture needs to be embedded. You know, like in the beginning, that Feynman mentioned that there is a need to include culturally responsive pedagogy in teaching and learning. That's what we're trying to do. Look at our world today. It's getting so out of hand that our children have forgotten their language, that our children have forgotten who they are, their identity. But if we are able to put some of that in the classroom, why not? But this is reflecting on the pedagogy from Western cultures. But why is that? Why is that we believe, so we strongly believe as a group, that there are gaps in this article that was written? Why? It's saying that principals and admin need to take charge, that, you know, to take charge of culture being included in physical education teaching. So it depends on the top. So if the top don't believe in it, then what would teachers do? PE is taught in Western forms. So Western form of sports is done in classrooms. That was that came out of this article. It was very clear. I'll give you an example today. At Derrida College, our children are playing frisbee. Is that culture? I don't think so. Right? Parents and PE, their perceptions are very different. Parents, when you go home, they think of PE as sports and play, whereas the identity of sports in the cultural sense is somewhat different. But the gaps definitely are there. And where is this coming from? The author went and attended 4 classes in 3 different schools. Now, if we take 1 hour in every school, probably she might have spent 2 hours at Derrida being the biggest school. I know it's a lot of assuming, but that's what is here. It's lacking a lot of information for us to be able to say that this article is credible and hits the nail on the top, that there is attitudes of students towards culture and PE. Where is the Pacifica perspective in this? You know, it would have been nice if they would have given us what is happening in Samoa, in Tonga, in Tahiti, which is the Polynesian countries, just like the Cook Islands. Niue, Tokelau, who also do the NCEA curriculum. The PE curriculum mentioned in here, again, is from New Zealand. So it's not Cook Islands Māori, but probably New Zealand Māori aspects in it.
Highlights on the critical examination of the methodology. The participants of the article were 101 students and 3 teachers from 3 different schools. Survey questionnaires were used to collect data. A mixed methodology approach was used, that is both qualitative and quantitative methods were used. questionnaires were given to the participants who had to give their response using 1 to 5 Likert scale. And further, using an exploratory factor analysis, these 20 question responses were further divided into 3 factors: family PE, cultural PE, and personal PE. Qualitative method was also used, where questionnaires also contained open questions to which participants were asked to explain why they had chosen that particular response on the scale of 1 to 5. However, students' qualitative response was not included in the article, which could be one of the drawbacks or the gap in the article. It highlights whether the methodology used in this article was adequate. We as a group think it was not. The researcher could have included the following: student qualitative response should have been included in the article, as it would have given in-depth, genuine responses to the questionnaires rather than just giving the response using 1 to 5 Likert scale. The researcher could have used more participants, because the more the participants, the better the study is. The researcher only used years 9 and 10 as their participants out of the 13-year levels, right from year 1 to year 13, doing physical education in school. And lastly, data was represented in table format, which was a bit hard to read and relate. Instead, the researcher could have used graphs to display data, which is more easier to read and understand. This slide highlights whether the methodology used in the article addresses the research questions adequately. Yes, it addresses the research question adequately, as the research question was further broken down into survey questionnaires that was given to the participants.
Our conclusion is going to cover if the article covered or answered the 2 research questions. So the first research question for this article was, what are students' perceptions, their viewpoints of teaching, which includes cultural activities and has the emphasis on Cook Island traditional values? So looking at this question, from this defining or from this article, the students want to learn. They are eager to learn about the cultural values of the Cook Island, but it's not happening. It's not happening in Cook Islands because the curriculum itself, the curriculum of Cook Island itself is a New Zealand-based curriculum. So people at the top, the ones who are making the curriculum, should include the Cook Island cultural values in it so that the teachers can facilitate and teach their students the values of Cook Island culture. Moving on to the second research question for this article, which was, could the inclusion of cultural activities influence student learning participation and enjoyment in PE? Well, the answer is definitely yes. But the article clearly states it is not happening. So what is the reason? Why is it not happening? Students are participating, they are enjoying, they love playing PE, but not the cultural PE. The reason is simple, because it does not exist. In bibliography, the authors of this article has used APA 6th edition of referencing style. Out of all the references, about 80% is the Western authors. The crucial ones that were left out were probably the Pacifica perspective ones. The Cook Island ones that were used was authors themselves, plus ministries, publication, but no referencing of actual literature that is related to the author's topic and research. So we have come to the end of our presentation. Any questions from you guys?
Does this mean that our PE classes should be culturally based?
Okay, the question is, does this mean that
Our PE classes.
PE classes should be culturally? Okay, well, yes, PE classes should be culturally based, as get to know your identity, that is where you came from, who you are, and where you are. Well, perhaps this is not happening here in Cook Islands, as you guys know. We all know that in Cook Island the PE is taught in a westernized way. That is, the PE teachers teach you, they give importance to how to play rugby, soccer, or netball. But as students, you can make changes. You can let your parents and teachers know and understand just how important culture is even in your PE class.